Hello, welcome everyone to a Friday edition of the SportsIntel.com podcast. Still looking for a name. We will have one soon enough. But for now, hope everyone is enjoying their summer as best as they can. Everyone is staying safe, staying healthy. And I am joined today by Matt DeSaro and Eric Gibbs to talk about the latest in sports. And if we're going to talk about the latest, we're going to have to start with what's going on in Washington. Major story yesterday in the Washington Post about what is happening with the formerly known as Redskins franchise. Major allegations of really systemic sexual harassment in the corporate offices of the team, and it certainly sounds like if Daniel Snyder wasn't already having a rough couple of weeks or couple of decades. I'm sure some people would look at it that way. He is really on the line now, and beyond the details of the story, which are really pretty brutal. Again, this is an exclusive by the Washington Post yesterday. People were talking about it even before the story dropped. We had an idea what was going on, and three of the people that are implicated in the story, of course, had resigned earlier in the week, and now we know why they did. One of them was their play-by-play announcer. So it's a mess. And I think we need to start thinking about, beyond the nickname, what's the future now for the Washington franchise? And do we think that we are looking at the end of the Dan Snyder era? Eric, what do you think is going to be happening if you had a crystal ball? We know the owners are meeting today on league matters, but now this is obviously a huge league matter. Where do you see this going, and are we looking at maybe seeing the end of the Dan Snyder era sooner rather than later?
I think we are. I mean, it's a private team, so the league legally cannot force him to change over. They can't force him to give up control. However, it can certainly put enough pressure on him, and the minority owners will definitely be putting some pressure on him. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see some major changes coming, and Snyder's run at the top of the list come to an end.
Yeah, it's interesting you said it. Like, legally they can't do it, but of course I think we have a precedent here with what happened with Jerry Richardson in Carolina. He had allegations made against him directly, and he chose to sell the team, but I don't think anyone believes that he just did that on his own, that he just decided out of the goodness of his heart to sell the team, that almost certainly pressure was put upon him to do it. And I would have to think that, Jerry Richardson was not, I think he was a fairly well-liked owner in the league, and Daniel Snyder is not a well-liked owner in this league. And I would imagine that now that the blood is in the water here, if there was any way for the other owners to bear pressure on him to make a move, now would probably be the time. I would imagine that whatever they're talking about today, that Zoom call would probably be pretty hot. This is not good for the league. This would not be good for the league at any time, but certainly now. I mean, the Redskins are the only team in the news right now, and for all the wrong reasons. So I would think that there will probably be some sort of a move here to try to force him to do it, and maybe make it look like he did it on his own, but that with considerable pressure from the other owners. But I think that's it. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Sorry, I don't even know if at this point anyone's going to care enough about Snyder to let him save face. I mean, the writing's on the wall. His backers, FedEx and everyone else, already showed that they're not on his side. At this point, I don't think they care about his position in the league or with the team. And yeah, they'll definitely, the league owners, the team owners, minority owners are going to definitely be looking to push him out. What you said about the Carolina Panthers was obviously true, and that was nowhere near as substantial as what's going on right now with the Redskins. I mean, the spotlight has been completely on the Redskins over the past couple of weeks, and the league doesn't want it. And they'll definitely be working every angle to get him off of out of the team permanently.
Eric, let me ask you a crazy question. Let's say that Snyder does wind up selling the team here, whether it's this year or within a year. And we know that they would like to get a new stadium. There's been talk of that as well. In fact, that was one of the issues with the name change was, I think it was, I think they were looking at old RFK Stadium and maybe, refurbishing that. And the owners, I guess the city, I think, still owns RFK Stadium. They said, we're not even going to talk to you until you change the name. But here's my question. If we got a brand new majority owner of the team, do you think there's any chance that there would be any thought of moving the team? Could we see it? Yeah. Do you think we could see that happening?
I think it's a possibility. It might be an outside possibility. I mean, the Redskins have such a rich heritage in the Washington area. Regardless of what Snyder has done, regardless of what the front office has done, the team itself has had a loyal following over the years, over the decades. And there's right now, part of me thinks that there is a chance the team could relocate. However, drumming up enough support, finding a new fan base with everything has been going on is not an easy task. So they might stick around. That all is going to come down to whether or not they can get, the local support they need. Maybe Washington doesn't want them to hang around anymore. It would not be inconceivable to see the team relocate to Virginia, for example. Maybe even pick up an entirely new persona. Completely drop Washington. Completely drop anything that ever had to do with Washington, especially coming off of the 3-13 year and the long history of just poor judgment calls on the part of the front office. Apparently, they were too busy with their extracurricular activities and not concentrating on putting a good team together on the field. So there's a lot that could happen. I think, though, in the end, they'll stay at home. They'll still be Washington something, whether it's going to be the Washington Warriors, whether it's going to be the Washington Victors, who knows?
Red Foxes.
Yeah, that's high on the list right now.
I like it. I like Red Foxes.
Red Foxes and Warriors are the two that are sticking out the most right now. So we'll see what happens. Everyone says that a name is going to be coming within the next couple of weeks, so we won't have to wait too long for all of those bets to be paid out.
Matt, one thing I wanted to ask you more from a football standpoint. One thing that we were seeing here now in these two stories, the name change and now this story yesterday, is Ron Rivera is really taking a outsized role here. Daniel Snyder had nothing to say, but we're hearing from Ron Rivera on the issue of the name. And I believe he was quoted in the story, in the Post story yesterday. It seems like he really has taken on a major role, well beyond his coaching duties with the team. He's becoming kind of the face of the franchise in a lot of ways. And I do wonder, obviously, if Snyder winds up selling, I would imagine that can only be a plus from a football standpoint. But with all the turmoil going on in the front office, does that provide an opportunity for Rivera to get this team focused on what it needs to do on the field, to tune out the kind of, you know how they like to do the us against them in the NFL. Sure. They use any excuse they can. Could this, from a football standpoint, could this wind up actually serving them well, allowing Rivera to really put his fingerprint on this franchise and get the team moving back in the right direction?
It's a very interesting observation. I hadn't quite thought about that. Mostly I was thinking about how this was going to be a distraction, but thinking about what you just said, he has done quite a good job of channeling. I don't know, maybe not all the negative energy, but just the energy that's surrounding this team and putting it into the right places. Perhaps if he can rally his players around all of this hardship that they're going through, I could see him coming out as a face of the franchise, which is kind of unusual for a coach, especially one in his situation. He's a smart guy, he's a talented coach, and if anybody can turn this around, I think it could be him right now.
Yeah, I mean, we may actually, that might be the last thing that Daniel Snyder ever did for the team substantially was bringing in Rivera, but that might be one of the best moves he ever made. It just seems like Rivera has really, you think about since Joe Gibbs left, and you think about the coaches they've had there. I don't know if they've had a coach with the kind of personality and respect that Ron Rivera comes with. I think it's easy to make fun of them. They've been so bad,
Sure.
but I wouldn't be surprised if he has them turned around in a couple of years. Again, I'm just talking strictly on between the lines on the field. Obviously, this is a franchise that needs a serious house cleaning, to say the least. Again, if people have not had a chance to read that story, I highly recommend it. It's brutal, but it's quite eye-opening. And of course, it also makes you wonder if this is the kind of thing that's going on in other, what's going on in other teams. Like, is this just the Redskins, or is this a systemic problem throughout the league? I guess that remains to be seen. I don't think that would necessarily shock anyone if it turned out that there were many teams that had issues like this. And maybe now
It shocked me if there weren't, to be quite honest.
Right, exactly. And it'll be interesting to see if this now is a tipping point for other teams to have to go through this and to have to examine their own practices. Moving from the pros to the college game. Eric, are we playing college football this year? Or are we going to have? Is this going to be the greatest example of spring football we've ever seen?
I hate to say it. At this point, I think spring football is almost a guarantee. I know the NCAA is still trying to work out some issues, still has hopes to bring football live in the fall, but the president, Mark Emmert, released a memo today that, if you read between the lines, almost sounds like it's a warning that NCAA football is off. He's talking about the fact that we have not been able to control the coronavirus pandemic. The numbers are way, way higher than they would have ever wanted to see to put players back on the field. And it just really sounds like he's saying, hey, guys, get ready. We're going to be calling it off. I think at this point it would take almost a miracle for college football to make its way to the fall.
Yeah, I mean, more and more leagues are either outright canceling their fall sports. I think the Patriot League, and it seems like it's all, none of the Power Five have done this yet. The Power Five are all now they have said, hey, we're only going to play conference schedules, which is almost an admission of defeat in and of itself. I mean, it's just such a, it upsets the apple cart for so many other conferences, and to have all these non-conference games get wiped out. But I think the conferences are kind of moving that way on their own, and it is going to be interesting to see when the Big Ten or the Pac-12, the ACC, the SEC, when do they finally, how long are they going to hold on to this, this dream? And I kind of feel like it's the same thing with the NFL. Again, we're recording this on Friday morning on the West Coast. There is supposed to be a owners meeting, a telemeeting in the NFL. We still don't have start dates for training camp. It's July 17th, and they have not even indicated when training camp is going to start. We've already lost 2 weeks of the preseason. Are we just wishing? I mean, it's one thing for baseball and basketball to get started, and it looks like they're at least going to start. But for football and for the nature of the game, I mean, are we just like pretending at this point, and just denying reality? Matt, what do you think? I mean, what's your feeling? Do you expect to see any football in September and October?
I feel like I go back and forth on a daily basis about this. I think right now, I mean, they're waiting to see what happens with baseball and basketball, obviously. But the big hurdle for me for college is the students coming back. I mean, how are you going to play football if you don't have kids in school? If you're saying, the climate right now is not safe enough for us to host classes, what you're actually here to be doing, but yet we're still going to run these football games and I think that looks really bad. I don't think they're going to do that, but I think that that's going to be the really big hang up for college football in the fall, at least right now, is how are you going to justify playing football games if you're not allowing students back on campus?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Like you're gonna play these games in these enormous stadiums with nobody in them, and it's like for what? I know
Exactly. For what? For the money? Because that's it, really, right? I mean, for our entertainment, but I mean, I can't imagine that's their first priority on the colleges. And I read Ohio State was talking about playing games with 20,000 people in the stadium, and it's why exactly? What's the point here? I mean, look, all of us want to watch football. Don't get me wrong, but at some point, it has to be more than that, right?
Yeah, and I just again, the NBA obviously is a very physical league, and guys are going to be sweating all over each other, and they're going to be breathing on each other and all that. But at least the way the NBA is doing it, I mean, by trying to have it in this sort of hermetically sealed environment, maybe they can control. If nobody inside the bubble has the virus, then they can breathe all over each other, right? I mean, if you don't have it, you don't have it. You can't give something that you don't have. But for football, there's so many players. And particularly in college, I mean, you're coming from, and they're kids. I mean, you're asking 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, to follow these intricate rules and not, I mean, if Rashard Holmes is going out for, takeout in the bubble, if he can't, here's a professional basketball player who can't even follow like the most basic rule. He's got to go. What does anybody know, by the way, what he got? What did he go to get? Do we know? Was it like was it McDonald's? Was it Little Caesars? Like what was Rashard doing, man? But if they can't even control that, I mean, how could you possibly control all these kids at all these schools? And it's just, or even in the pros. I mean, it's just the way that football is played. I mean, if you're the coronavirus, you're like, ooh, give me some football. Yeah, I can infect everybody, in one play. And so it just doesn't seem likely. Are we gonna recover as a? Eric, I remember a couple of weeks ago we were talking about this, and you were like, I got to have my football, and I think we all feel that way. Are we gonna serve? Will we get by? Are we going to be okay if there's no, like, if the NFL says, yeah, we can't do it? What do you think that would? I mean, we've never really experienced anything like that. We've had labor stoppages that lasted a few weeks, but obviously we've never had a season wiped out. What do you think? What is that going to be like in the cold and dreary winter when there's what are Sundays going to be like in this country with no football? If that were to come to pass.
It's hard to say. Personally, I plan on putting myself in a self-induced coma for 6 months and hope that everything's back to wake up. I don't know. I mean, I have such a hard time imagining an entire fall without football. It's something that is just beyond my imagination completely. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that there's something that can be done. I think there's a slight better chance of seeing the NFL than college football. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but it just means there's a better chance that the NFL will be able to move forward. If it doesn't happen, at the end of the day, what are you going to do? I mean, we're going to have to roll with it. We're going to have to sit through a lot of reruns, a lot of old games, catch up on old stats, and, it could be interesting. It's not ideal, but none of what's going on right now is ideal, and we just have to adapt to the situation. Matt was talking about how it's hard to see college games being held if college campuses aren't back in action. And that's the difference, one of the biggest differences between the NFL and the college level. In the NFL, it would be a little easier to try to work out some quarantines. But with college ball, you've got the players who have to attend classes, so they're not able to quarantine. They have to have their education. They have to interact with other students that aren't in football. And there's just no way, it's impossible to put a lockdown on the entire college community. Impossible.
It's
You
true.
know, Emmert said he produced a chart and showed how the numbers are staying so much higher than everyone had expected when they first thought that fall football would be brought back. And he said the data point is headed in the wrong direction. If there is to be college sports in the fall, we need to get a much better handle on the pandemic. That statement right there says to me that there will not be college football unless we have the coronavirus under control. We don't, and we're not going to have it in the next month, period. So
Right.
to that, I think that college football, like I said earlier, has to be taken off the schedule. Hopefully, pro ball will be able to continue. If it doesn't, like I said, it's time to pull out the VHS tapes and watch reruns. A lot of
Yeah.
reruns.
I have an idea. I think I know how we can do to make it work. What we got to do is we got to launch a satellite into low orbit, right? And on the satellite, we put that Men in Black, flashy thing, right? And then just zoop and just wipe out everybody's memories. And so then you can just replay the 2019 seasons, college and pro, and it'll be like brand new to everyone. And that way you can replay it. And so we just got to get that flashy, memory thing going, and then we'll be fine. My wife and I have talked about that. We're like, we've binge watched all our Netflix shows. So now we're like, we should just like bang our heads all like 10 or 20 times until we like concuss ourselves. And then we won't remember that we watched them. We can watch them again. And so maybe that's what we need to do, We're like on blind spot, like inject you with that, that zip that wipes out your memory. And then, so then you can watch 10, 20 seasons of football, and it would be like it would be totally brand new.
Who needs a season? You just need a game on VHS.
Right. You just watch the same game over and over and over again and just keep wiping your memory each time. And then so that every time you watch it, it's brand new. I think we may be onto something here. So, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But it's not all gloom and doom. And we are going to be back on Tuesday. And I think it's going to be one of the happiest. We haven't been doing a lot of these, but this one coming up I think will be our most optimistic and happiest one of all, because we're going to talk about Major League Baseball opening weekend. And we're going to make some predictions for this 60-game season, and we're going to talk about the fact that we're going to be playing some baseball. So Major League Baseball, you can't have anything happen over the weekend. We got to be on track so that when we talk again on Tuesday, we can actually talk about our teams. I have a hot take already. I'm going to tease this out early, but I'm going to tell you right now who the 2020 World Series champion is going to be. It's not the Dodgers. It's not the Yankees. It's the San Diego Padres. San Diego Padres are going to win the 2020 World Series, and on Tuesday I'll explain to you why. But and the fact that I live in San Diego has really nothing to do with the fact that I'm saying that. But yes, that is. They made a big trade last night. Big trade last night that will become critical as we move toward the end of September and into October. We'll talk about all that on Tuesday. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, for listening in. Again, we promise we'll start talking about happy topics soon, and it won't all be gloom and doom. But for Eric and for Matt, everyone have a great weekend, have a safe weekend, and we will talk to you next week.